I go to the table every week and it changed my life.
One thing I can say about Ashley is that she's safe at the table.
At the table with Ashley, we get to talk about real deep issues affecting the youth.
Welcome to The Table, where we're bringing real topics to the table. The topic we've chosen today is one that so many people keep talking about, and that's rape. Every time I look at the newspaper, every time I listen to the radio, we're talking about this subject. It's very relevant, and unfortunately, it's happening to a lot of people. So today, we just want to talk about why is this happening, and is there anything we can do to stop it? And what about the people who have suffered from it? Is there anything they can do to heal from this awful violation to their bodies? So, welcome, everyone, to The Table. We're here today to discuss a real issue that some of us have experienced, some of us have had friends who've experienced it. So why do you think this is happening?
I think it's one of the leading issues that people don't want to open up because they're afraid or they're scared or they're being threatened. So that's why now people are starting to come out because, a lot of people are now starting to take a stand against it. So
why do you think people are afraid of talking about this? Why is it a taboo subject?
Sometimes it's because the victims are afraid of the stigma behind the rape that happens to them, like from the society or the community, the families, because most of the times it actually does happen within the family. So the family sometimes just wants to contain that between the family. They don't want it to spread into the community. So maybe that's why, because, yeah.
And to add on to that, for those who have actually voiced it out to the family, police, they never got the kind of help that they were expecting, which is why they are afraid to come out. And people, like he was saying, like hiding behind others. Now it's coming out because they see that one person is standing against it. So if this person is getting the kind of publicity they are getting from social media, radio, like you were saying, now they are feeling they just needed a safe.
So basically you're saying that probably what was happening was people felt like, what's the point of speaking out? My family is going to give me a bad stigma. My relatives might even believe me. And if I go to the police, they just say, and they don't really do anything about it. So ultimately, I put making myself even more vulnerable after I've already been violated, only just to be stepped on again and not treated seriously.
Yes.
But now people are starting to actually take it for the seriousness it is, so they're having more confidence to speak out. Okay.
I also think it's more than that. I also think if you notice the people who are coming out now, it's because they don't want to be seen victim no more. Because it stops you from doing a lot of things. When such a thing happens to you, everybody stops seeing you as Anita. They start seeing you as a rape victim. It becomes your identity.
I think another part of it is that it's a lack of knowledge. Because you look at rape, there's sexual harassment, there's sexual assault. Each of these have different connotations to them. They have different meanings. And because it's not black and white, people don't know how to define it anymore. Most people, when they think rape, they think violence. They think there has to be a knife involved. Sometimes that's not it. Sometimes it's coercion. And it's really confusing for a lot of people. So when most victims come out and the story doesn't fit the black and white picture everybody has, the stigma, like they were saying, comes in. And then, like Anita saying, no one wants to be looked at as a victim. I would rather wait until I know I have enough waiting or someone else went through something similar so that it seems like there's backing to my case.
There's power in numbers.
There's power in number, basically.
Yeah.
I also think that when you really think about it, when you consider rape and in a global standpoint, when you look at it, people never used to talk about rape. There's certain things in the world that people don't talk about. But because we're growing, the world is opening up and people are becoming more open to ideas. People are becoming free. People can say, I can talk about this. If you look 10 years back, people were not allowed to talk about rape. People were not allowed to talk about sexual harassment. But now it's becoming a global issue and more people are feeling like, I want to talk about this and it needs to be spoken about.
So now, let me ask you a question. She made a comment to say that the problem is sometimes when you speak out, then that's your identity. You are the rape victim. So do you feel like when someone speaks out, it's actually helping them in the process of healing? Or do you think it actually hurts them because now not only they know they're a rape victim, but everybody around them knows they're a rape victim? What do you think about that?
I personally think it's important for the person
who has survived rape to understand where they are at that point in time, that with the attention that I'm gonna get, because most people don't know these things, and obviously there's gonna be people who are gonna ask you questions like, how did it happen? What were you wearing? What were you doing there? And stuff like that. So you need to be sure you're going to be able to handle all of that, or sometimes just talk to a person that you trust and then heal, and then maybe if you feel you're ready to come out to the public or to the world, that's when you can do that, because sometimes just coming out can do you more damage than good.
Really, you should be able to just keep between whoever your victim is and the police, and they should deal with this. So one of the biggest messages, maybe, what would you want to say to the police or the people who have the power to fight for justice for you? What would the message you want to say to them?
The problem with rape is it doesn't just affect you physically, it affects you mentally, it affects you emotionally, and just sort of like for a person who has experienced that, feels like you've died on the inside. So when people just ridicule you, they make it worse. Don't take you seriously. They don't take you seriously, they make it worse. So which is why I feel it's important for the government or whoever is in power to educate the police, or get people who will be specifically dealing with those issues, not just anyone who's just going to be asking questions like, oh, so, because sometimes also like it's hard for the person who just went through that to just talk about it and say, hey, now I'm telling this person like, hey, this is what happened to me, and then like, oh, okay, go to that person, and then that person, now you also start talking about it again. I think also that's the reason why people don't go to them. They're like, oh, now I'm going to have to keep on talking about this thing.
I think the major thing that we should be considering at this time is that the legal system, especially the legislation that addresses the rape issue, is it needs evidence to be proved. So when you take your case to the police and you have to, the reason why they grill you and ask you certain questions, which might sometimes be cruel as for some people, is because they're trying to get evidence from it. And the nature of rape is something that takes place within private. It's your word against the other person's word, you understand? So take, for example, if you report something and you just don't have enough evidence, and also you have to bear in mind that there are people who are genuinely getting raped, and there are people who are genuinely lying about getting raped. So the system cannot just go on and convict people because somebody came and said, I got raped. We could have a good legal system right now and say, I was thinking of the other day, something that was floating in the media, that this lady was intoxicated. And I said, you know what, true so. But everything that happened, it was during the time when she was intoxicated. She doesn't even know. If we could at least, I don't know if this would make sense, have a clause in our law that says, you cannot engage in sexual intercourse with somebody who does not have mental capacity to be able to say, I consent to that. Because
but she won't get that. You're not going to get that fast.
And that is so true. You understand? That could be a starting point.
You can't have sex with a drunk person. That's not happening.
Because all the time they're going to be agreeing to it. You always hear that person, she was willing to do it. So it's quite a very touchy subject.
And it's tricky. Like you said, it's not as clean cut as you can, because if you make the law so harsh and so easy, then people now begin to abuse them just to begin to abuse a man. And we've heard of that, where women abuse their power of saying, this man raped me, knowing he didn't, just to get back at him.
That is true.
And so it is a hard issue, because
it is a hard issue.
Like you said, it's by its nature, it's done in private. And how do you prove it?
How do you prove it? And very interesting when you go into that to say that women do use that. I watched this other thing on Facebook. A lady was circulating, maybe she spent the night with this other gentleman. So the man was calling her names, all the bad names. So she comes down to the friends and she says, do you know you are busy calling me this and that? And last night I was taking care of you. Do you bear in mind that I've got your sperms inside me? I could go to the police and lay a rape charge against you. So basically, this is a very touchy subject.
In America, where I come from, one of the things we have is a registered sex offender website. So you can go to that website and find out people in your area who have been accused of these crimes before. I'm not sure, I'd have to look into the legislation of how long it goes for. I don't think it's a lifetime thing, but I'm not sure about that. But the point is, would something like that be something that maybe legislation could look into? Because sometimes you find that people who have done this before will do it again, especially if they got away with it, like you're saying. And it might be, and you mentioned earlier that sometimes it's not a cut and dry. When you think rape, sometimes you think a man in the bushes that jumps out. But sometimes it's a man that seems really nice at dinner, takes you home, and becomes a very different person. But if you can go to a place and realize that this guy has done this before to other people, maybe it helps you prepare yourself to protect yourself. Is that something we should look into, maybe, as from a legislative standpoint? Okay, so we've discussed why it's happening. One of the reasons it's happening is because there's not harsh punishments, so there's nothing to deter people from doing it because we rarely hear about anything ever happening to these people who rape. And even when we do, you hear about the rape and like 5 years later, you might hear that something happens. So it's not quick enough to deter the crime. That's one reason. Another reason we heard is that there's stigmas involved. The family doesn't want to hear it. And that's probably the worst, is when your own mother or your own aunt says, don't talk about that because you're talking about your father, even if he's doing something wrong, or your uncle. So we need to empower our families to realize there is nothing wrong with supporting the young girl child in your family who is being violated. The allegiance needs to be to her and not to the perpetrator who is abusing an innocent little person. That's the second reason we talked about. And another reason we talked about is because sometimes we don't know who is doing this because there's no one talking about it. And so maybe we need to be more aware and educating our people as to who, maybe a registered sexual offender, but also just talking about, like the media is doing right now, a great job, that this is a crime because sometimes people don't take this as seriously as it is. Now, we also mentioned solutions. What do we do to stop it from happening full stop? And over here, we had heard somebody said, let's talk about the men who are doing this. What can we do about them?
So from a guy's point of view, what I feel is for them to be a rapist, it comes from an individual. It means there's something wrong with the individual man that is causing him to. And for me, one thing I've come to realize is we're finding, instead of having men chasing after God's own heart, you find there are men chasing after a woman's heart to feel satisfied, to feel, happy, to feel content, to feel powerful. And so for those guys that can't take rejection to some extent, you find that...
Not to some extent, to a big extent.
To a big extent.
We keep about passion killers. I mean, people take a knife or a gun because they get rejected. Yeah.
That's what I mean. So you find those... they take it to the extreme that, I still have to force myself on them because I still need to feel powerful. I need to feel, accepted. I need to feel loved. I need to feel satisfied. And so there's that problem with that individual man because the average man does not know who he is or where his identity comes from. And that's what I feel from the individual point of view.
Okay.
I'd just like to start off by saying, first of all, I don't think we should be making this a gender issue because rape is rape. Rape doesn't have a gender. Just like violence doesn't have a gender, there's women who violate men's rights in so many ways. So I know the vast majority of this thing is where men are wrong and they're the perpetrators and women are the victims. That's true, but if we focus on that only, we're going to forget the little 10% of those little boys whose teachers and whose aunties and whose older sisters in some cases rape them in bathrooms at school, at home, or wherever. So can we kind of make this a non-gender thing?
Just to add on to that, I feel like we spend most of our times in school, so why don't schools come up with consent classes? I mean, teach a boy that no, this is not right. Teach a girl as well that no, this is not okay. That's something that we should actually...
I think we need to change this culture of people feeling entitled, because there's a saying that says when it changes when the mind is enslaved. Some people are abusing other people and it's like they don't know that they are abusing people, and some people are being abused and they don't know that they are being abused. So I think we really need to go to our culture that says you don't talk about things, you sweep things under the carpet. Basically also like teach kids about sex. We learned about these things at school. I had to learn about it from school that, when a person touches you in a certain way, it's a bad touch, But at home, nobody would ever tell you that nobody should touch you anyway.
So when you were being touched like that, how did that make you feel? Were you feeling this is wrong? Or was
you
that
feel that this is wrong, but then how do I tell my parent? Because also our culture, there are things that kids cannot talk about with their parents, Sometimes even when a person is not saying, I'm going to kill you, there are things that you cannot talk about. There are things that you cannot voice out in our culture. So you can't just say, hey, this is happening to me.
So if this is a very sensitive issue. If you don't feel comfortable, that's fine. But would either of you feel comfortable talking to the mothers out there to say what are some things that you would advise mothers that you wish somebody would have told your mom?
Well, for me, I feel like nobody can, especially when it happens to you when you're young, they think that you're lying or you're making a story up or something. But immediately when a child tells you that mom, dad, I'm being raped, or I think uncle or auntie or teacher's doing something to me, you should take it very seriously because you don't know how much it will hurt your child in the future. Because I grew up with a burden in me and it really affected my life. I won't lie, it affected me. And even at this point in time where I should be focusing on building up my career, improving my relationship with God, like it really pulls me back. So to the mothers out there, take your child very seriously. Even if it's your husband, your boyfriend, whoever you bring up into your child's life, you should really consider the negatives and positive sides of this person, because not everybody's a good person. I might be a nice person today, but tomorrow when you're not around or when I'm with your child alone, like I'm gonna show your child my real self. Yes.
I would say do not trust anyone with your child.
Yes.
Don't. And also learn your child, know your child. This barrier between this is an elder, you're a child, that gap needs to be filled. You need to be there, you need to be their best friend, you need to be their go-to person. So that whatever happens to them, they need to feel safe. Be a safe place for them. They shouldn't, how much shameful the thing feels, they should feel safe to talk to you about it. Because you may lose people kill themselves, people grow up. Personally, I felt I had died. And I was wondering, why wasn't my mother able to see? You know?
Why couldn't your mom see that you were dying?
Yeah, why couldn't, because like she would see other things like, you were so absent-minded, you were this, you were this, you were this. And on the inside I'm crying, I'm saying, hey mom, can't you see that this thing is happening to me? You know? So you need to...
And if I might interject here, you said even doctors were mentioning this. Because we talked about this ahead of time. Yeah. So
I spoke to my mom about it in 2012, and then she said I was lying, I was only trying to hurt her. So that damaged me, because from there I was very self-destructive. You know, I tried to kill myself a number of times, and then it didn't happen, and then I didn't know what to do anymore because I'm trying to die, I'm not dying, you know, that kind of a thing. So you're just like that person.
You're like a dead man walking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So until just recently, I was diagnosed with anxiety, severe depression, and PTSD, you know. So my mom had to listen then. You know, and she was really heartbroken because at first when it came out the wrong way. I was moving out of home because I was angry. I was angry at her because she wasn't able to see. I was angry at her because she wasn't there to protect me when it happened. Even though I wasn't really saying, hey mom, this thing is happening to me. But my expectation as a child was that she's my mother, she's supposed to see. You know? So because she wasn't able to see, I felt, you are neglecting me. And whatever relationship she tried to build with me, it was like, but you're not focusing on this thing here. So when I told her, she was like, you know, because what I remember is what happened when I was 5. And then she was like, you know, I think it happened when we were much younger, because there was a time when I used to take you to doctors and they told me that there was a possibility that you're being sexually abused. And I don't remember that time. So, yeah. Family, just be there for your kids. And I'm grateful that God really worked in my heart, because that's what I prayed for. I said, God, heal my heart, because I can't be working like this. I can't be carrying this anymore. It's damaging me. It's eating me up.
Let's talk more about this issue of a man's character. I really think that's a very insightful thing what you've said. The idea that a man is looking to be validated. A man is looking to be... First of all, let me not say a man. Let me say... a person who is raping another person is wanting that instant gratification. It's a pure act of selfishness. It's someone saying, I want something that pleases me right now, and I could care less what it does to you and your body. So that's a character issue. How do we deal with that from a character standpoint? Because if we can deal with a man understanding that he doesn't have to have what he wants when he wants it, and we can talk about that character issue, maybe it'll solve, if we fix the root, it can solve some of the fruit. Is that possible? I mean, we know sin can never be eradicated from planet Earth, but is it possible to teach people in such a way that their characters change? Is character development a reality? Yeah.
I think I'll start with this statement. What I believe is God is in control of things that are outside our control, but that which is under our control, He has no control over.
Oh, that sounds
And what pretty much that means is we can talk about rape from an external point of view, but really we have no control over people that are outside our sphere of influence. But that which we have, or for example, that I have control of is what is my perspective and what is the perspective of the people that are close to me. And that's why I went into talking into things like, if you understand who you are as a man, that your identity is not based on your performance with a woman or anything other than God, then you see you always have a void. And to the extreme it goes into, it's not just rape even, because the extreme goes into other addictions. And then because at the core you don't understand who you are, and so you seek your identity from somewhere else.
So how do we teach that? How do we teach?
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a lot of ways that notion can happen. I mean, I like what you said when you said if you address the root, you might fix the fruit. That's a good one. So it's entirely upon there's a stronger notion that says basically it says that a child has been raised by the community, right?
We say it takes a village to raise a child.
There we go. That's the one. It takes a village to raise a child. I mean, a village can be in a sense that from the family, the fathers, the uncles, those strong-willed uncles that can teach a boy how to be a man, or to the pastors, or to the neighbors, or to the school.
What I hear you saying is, I know we have moral and religious education, which just teaches us the facts about Christianity, about Buddhism, about Hinduism. But perhaps we should add to our curriculums character development. Yeah. How do you treat people? How do you deal with issues? How do you communicate? A lot of these problems stem because when someone has been violated, they don't know how to communicate that because they weren't taught at home. It's not something you're born with the ability to go and talk these things out. And yet study after study show that when we repress our emotions and we don't discuss it, it eats us up inside. And we either continue to hurt others, because hurt people hurt people. Yeah. So one of the things that we have talked about is the presence of God and the healing process. And we all need to know that there is a God who loves you. And according to the Bible, when we look at Deuteronomy and we look at Genesis, when we look through the Old Testament and see the character of God, He is disgusted by this habit. He says it is violation, it is wrong, and actually in the Old Testament you were stoned if your man did this. So it is something that your Heavenly Father takes very seriously. And so we need to understand that there's a God who loves you, who will never leave you, who will never forsake you. In the Bible it says Jesus wept. And I believe that when He looks at you when you're being raped, He is weeping at the sin that is being put on you. So please know that you can go to your Father. I hope you can find Christian brothers and sisters like you have found who will walk with you, who care about you, who will listen to you. But I can promise you that you have a Heavenly Father who does care about what you're going through. And He has the power, like you said, to put a new heart in you. The Bible says that He can take something that's as cold as stone and He can bring life to it. And only God can do that because it's supernatural healing. And so I pray that those who have been affected will find their Heavenly Savior and their Creator can bring beauty out of ashes, because He can do that, and only He could do that. And so we just hope that you've been encouraged today by today's session at the table, and our prayers that for the legislators that listened, hopefully you've heard something we can do about this. From the police, hopefully you know this is a sensitive issue and you treat it. From the family, we hope you take this seriously. And from the church, rise up and speak to the girls and the boys and the youth in your community, because many more people than we realize, just by seeing this room here, are being affected by something that is destroying us inside, even if we're not speaking it out. Thank you.
Are personally going through this. I know that at different stages of healing. I just want to let you know that you're not alone. And I know it was vulnerable for me to share my story. It's a sensitive thing to talk about. But the reason I did it is because I didn't have anyone to talk to, and I felt that no one would understand. So I'm available to talk to you. My contact is just here below. Please feel free to contact me.